Welcome to the Life in Red podcast. This is a way of life that emphasizes positive sexuality, self-love, and confidence. On this journey, red is now your new color. Be courageous. Be passionate. Be sexy. And never stop living your best red life. So now I have one question for you. Are you ready to live your life in red? To join us on this journey, like and subscribe below. Welcome to the Life in Red podcast. This is Brittany, your host, and today we are going to have a little talk about what's your fantasy? It's time to talk about fantasies, guys. What are the myths behind fantasies? What do they mean about you? And today I have a beautiful woman here to help me out. Her therapeutic style is affirming, accepting, and solution-focused. She has a compassionate demeanor as she deals with your mental health and sexual issues that you guys may face every day. So Ellie, thank you for being on with me today and talking about fantasies. I'm so excited. Also, you guys, I have a surprise for you. At the end of this podcast, you're not going to want to miss. So before we get into that, I would love to know it's always interesting to know what got you into this line of work, into dealing with sexuality and helping people.
It's hard for me to answer that because I feel like I never have a really great response.
That's okay.
When I was just growing up, I don't know, I was just a little maybe more sheltered, but over time I found out that I just really had comfort around discussing these things, and I could just tell how important they were in people's lives. And so it just kind of organically happened where I wanted to help people, and I realized in the intimacy world, connection world, sexual world, I was super comfortable. And, I don't judge, I don't yuck anybody's yum, and it's just been
cool.
Fun.
I just have to say, because that's like all I talk about in here. I don't blame you. I mean, it is fun, and it's very rare in society today to have someone like you who doesn't judge. So I'm glad you're there for people because they need that.
For sure.
Yeah. Well, we were talking about what we were going to talk about today, and fantasies are so much fun to talk about. Mm-hmm. But I oftentimes wonder, I know that each of you out there have fantasies. A lot of you are too scared to talk about them. But where do these fantasies stem from or come from within each of us? Do you know?
I think that's probably different for everybody.
Right.
It could be something from when they were younger. It could be something that, I feel like an easy one, unfortunately, is like, Princess Leia from Star Wars.
Yeah.
And,
Space Ones.
Right. And a lot of people watch that. And, this is not gender specific, but oftentimes men, that Princess Leia costume, and the bikini is just something that was really exciting and arousing. And so that may play into some of the fantasy that they want to explore or enjoy now. Or just, different figures, sexy, police officer, or just whatever, right? So everybody's kind of different in where that starts or what is exciting to them. But that's kind of the fun with fantasy, right?
Exactly. Well, and it's kind of weird, the topic of the show, to bring it back to childhood. But I know when I was a kid, it was so much more acceptable and a lot easier to tap into that imagination and tap into that world. And it was okay to go to that place. And of course, we come back to fantasy. I feel like that is your imagination as an adult in your sexuality. Mm-hmm. And it's stimulating. It's fun. So yeah. No, that was a hard one. I wasn't sure. I was just curious if there was like anything there. But so in your practice, what are the main, like if you have people with discrepancies around maybe like they're afraid to bring up to their partners, like, hey, I have this anime fantasy, and they know their partners, let's say, super conservative with sexuality. I don't know. What would your advice be for someone to open up to their partner about their fantasies?
I mean, I feel like you have to do some groundwork first, and just being able to have open, non-judgmental, and healthy communication around intimacy and sex.
Right.
Because if somebody doesn't feel secure or safe in having any conversations, they're definitely not going to jump straight to fantasies. Especially if they're concerned, that they'll be judged for whatever the fantasy is. You know, there's so many different things and ways to just start creating safety. I think just small conversations to really build trust, like if they haven't had those before. Really just normalizing sex in relationships, intimacy in relationships, understanding like your own wants and needs or your
Right.
arousal, and then being able to talk about that with your partner or partners, and just kind of creating a good base, so that way you can then just kind of talk about anything, including fantasies.
Yeah. Space buns. So so I can't get away from the space buns now in my head. Um, so yeah, we'll go to one it's very interesting because I could imagine. I know originally I had fantasies, BDSM like fantasies, and being raised in Georgia, it was very undercover, like the kink world. And I didn't even know about it. I just started having fantasies about being tied up. I didn't watch 50 Shades of Grey. It just all of a sudden, the animal in me wanted to be tied up, spanked, and wax poured on me, and I didn't know why. And like, so it's very interesting. And what are some of the fantasies, anything that you would want viewers to know in that realm that could help them explore their own fantasies and stop judging themselves so heavily?
I mean, a big thing is like normalizing, I would say, and understanding your own arousal. There is a dominatrix who works out of Texas that I want to say her name is Kamichi or something like that. And she talks about when she was younger and watching a film and like feeling arousal for the first time. And unfortunately, for women, we don't have something that's just like obvious where men get an erection and that kind of clues them in that there's arousal happening.
That's true.
So, talking about when women or girls start feeling arousal, they might not even know what it is. There's a book called Come As You Are where she talks about just this idea of crushes, and that arousal for women is talked about in that way. So they don't necessarily connect to their body. So then I think as, you progress in life, you explore, you get older, and then you start clearing into your arousal and you're like, oh, like the idea of that is exciting. And I feel that arousing sensation. And so, it's kind of that exploration, but I think as you get older, that's when you're starting to like connect with what is arousing for you.
Right.
And I mean, that could be a lot of different things,
Well, yes. And I find that very interesting. It is more apparent with the male body. You could tell he's aroused. And I never thought about that it stays in kind of the crush phase, like it's up here and we won't know. And I think it is difficult when I think about now that I'm getting closer to 40, I am understanding what arouses me. Where I am now, it feels like that changes as we have life experiences. But yeah, well, it's interesting. And trying to think, like, when it comes to sexual fantasies, if a partner finds out that their partner has a sexual fantasy and they're like, oh, hell no, like this is not okay because it's messing with their belief systems, and they come to you, because I'm sure there's viewers out there that have had this. They found it from their wife, their husbands, or wife's, like, okay, she wants to be a donkey. I don't know. I'm just making something up. It's just, who knows? But they're like, oh my God, what's wrong with you? And it gets to that judgment phase where the wall's closing in. What do you suggest in that moment?
I mean, first of all, I always, encourage people to go to couples therapy because
Yeah.
some of these conversations are really hard and they don't necessarily know how to navigate it,
Yeah.
on their own. And then to also understand, like, where does some of that come from? I see a lot of clients who have left the LDS or the Mormon faith. And one of the
Mm.
reframes I give them is, so you were basically given messages like, you can't have sex till you're married, right? And everyone's like, yep, like that's pretty much the same across the board. But I'll ask them, did they tell you what your sex life should look like once you're married? I'm like, well, no. It's like, that means you get to create it and be whatever you want, right? And if
Mm.
something is exciting for you, who the fuck cares? It's exciting.
Right.
Like, if your partner, even if your partner isn't also aroused by the same things, but maybe they're willing to participate because they know that it brings you pleasure, even if for them it's more like a compersion moment where they're just happy for your pleasure, but they're not necessarily pleasured themselves,
Yeah.
that can still be a way you navigate that in a relationship and normalizing that.
Yeah. And that's beautiful. And compersion, it's something that I've been hearing more and more in the sex community. And could you go into that a little bit, like for the viewers?
Yeah, so compersion is basically when you are feeling good, and that could be like happy or pleasure for your partner's pleasure. And I think it comes up a lot in the poly community,
Yeah.
where it's more about their pleasure with a different partner, but essentially you're feeling good about that, or you're happy for them for that experience. Which I think for some people it's a little bit confusing,
Yeah.
especially when you're in the poly world or a poly relationship. But I think of like friendships, right? If I'm happy that, my partner has a really good friend that they also, feel safe in talking to and feel supported by, to me, that's also the same principle. It's just not sexual based. It's maybe
Yes.
emotional based or whatever.
Yeah, and that's interesting. Um, that's something I have to say. Since I've been hearing this term and doing poly episodes and things like that, it's been very difficult when checking in with myself. Like that whole idea, like there's certain people that's really easy, like my kids. Oh, I'm so glad they have a friend. I'm so glad they're happy. Yay, 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 yay. But with
Yeah.
a partner, it is hard sometimes because I think we're so attached. Our happiness and our life are so attached to the outcomes of their decisions, it feels like. So, like, it's so
Yeah.
weird that I get like, I'm not happy for you. I'm not happy for you if you go sleep with this other person. Like, it's really hard. I know this is off topic to fantasies, but I'm
No.
working on that. It's hard.
I mean, and being in the poly world is not for everybody. Some people very
Mm.
much enjoy monogamy, and that's great, if that makes them happy and they feel fulfilled. Um, I think what is always interesting to me is the idea that you can have feelings for more than one person is like foreign to a lot of people. But I think of like, if you have more than one kid, do you love both of your kids? Probably.
Yes.
If you have more than one friend, do you care about your friends? So we have the capacity to have feelings for more than one person. And for some people in the poly world, it is a true emotional relationship just as much as it's sexual. Or for some people, it's just a sexual experience and there's a separation there. Um, so there's so many ways to go about it. Obviously, figuring out what works for you and what you're comfortable with, and you and your partner, like having that security before you open those
Yeah.
doors. Because unfortunately, I see a lot of people that move too fast and then they're like, oh shit.
I have a couple, and I would never mention their names, but that's kind of what happened. And now they finally cleaned up the pieces, but
Mhm.
it's a beautiful couple. They just, I look up to them relationship wise. But yeah, the door was open, and then it was like boom, and
Right.
yeah.
But I mean, tying this into fantasy though,
Mm.
like for some people, they do have the fantasy of a sexual experience with a different person, a different
Mm-hmm.
gender. Some people are aroused by their partner having sex with someone else and they're not involved, or they're watching. Like, there's so
Yeah.
many fantasies. It's not just about you dress up in a costume, you know?
No. Well, that's a good thing right there. I was just thinking about now my fantasies, like I have a lot of girl on girl fantasies. I'm dominant. Now with my 3D real life in front of me, I prefer male and I like to be dominated. I am in the kink community. I like to play sub, but I'm a switch. But prefer to be dominated based on whatever. But my fantasies are interesting because it's with women and I'm dominating and
Mm-hmm.
maybe he's watching. Would I ever do that in real life? I don't find the same attraction in real life. And that's what I find interesting about fantasy. I think a lot of people may be scared around that. That's not actually necessarily what you actually, how does that work? That you
Yeah.
wouldn't want it here and why? Where's the,
Well, I mean, if you just think of fantasy, like the idea of a fantasy can be really exciting, but
mm-hmm.
it's not necessarily something you want to do or you'd be comfortable with, but just the idea of it can be fun. And then incorporating that, whether it's, you're with your partner and you're just kind of using it in your language of like, wouldn't you love seeing another woman, touching you?
Yeah.
And then, but it's still just between the two of you, but you're kind of incorporating fantasy because the reality maybe is not as arousing or exciting, but the
Mm-hmm.
fantasy of it is.
Yeah. Well, I think I had this misconception because, like, I'll have threesome fantasies, and I thought, does that mean because I have fantasies about women, like that I'm bi? And then I'm like, I've tested it. I'm like, I don't feel anything. And no offense to anyone who is bi. I just want to make that clear. I got to make that clear. I don't want to hurt anyone, but I'm not as of now. I don't feel that feeling, but I do get aroused by imagining it, the situation.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
I just found that interesting.
Yeah. And I mean, that's great, right? And you can use that when you're with your partner, with yourself, if that's arousing and it's fun, great. But if the reality of it is not the same, I mean, I feel like you could apply that to lots of things, like the fantasy of going on a cruise, but then you're on the cruise and you're like, oh, this isn't exactly what I thought it was going to be,
That's a good point.
right? Like, we're just talking about sex specific, but fantasy applies to a lot of things.
I like how you do that. I like how you compare things to things that are less scary in
Mm-hmm.
a way that people are willing to to really look at, to relate it to. So that's really cool. Yeah. Well, so that's interesting. So if the partner comes to you and they're into a certain fantasy, I think that is one thing I hear couples worry about. They're like, is that actually what you want to do with me? Like, and I think even the person with the fantasy can question their own sexuality, question all these things. But I think it's not necessarily that. It could
Right.
be situation arousal. It's like I come from a Christian background, very charismatic, close to, I would say I had Mormon friends. So it was Pentecostals. So like you don't even think about this. So it's kind of naughty. Like you're not supposed to do that. So that's, I think, where, but I don't know. I had a lot of insecurities around fantasies because it made me question who I was and why I like that kind of stuff and overthinking things.
Yeah. Well, and I think for some people, things feel like taboo, but
Hmm.
it also can be why they're exciting and they're interesting.
Yes.
Um, just looking at different examples, there's plenty of times. If you think of kids specifically, right, where they're testing boundaries because something they're told not to do something, but they're curious about it.
Hmm.
And I think that's just human nature, right? We find things that are exciting, we're curious, it's interesting. And as long as you're being safe, you're, not hurting yourself, you're not hurting somebody else, you have full consent, I don't see why you can't explore or why you shouldn't.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Well, I wanted to get into is there anything else you want to say about fantasies that you want to speak to?
I would just say go for it.
Do it.
Like I said, as long as you're being safe, good communication, consent, I say do it. And there's lots of resources or places in the community where people are happy to help. Like there's shibari classes, or here in Arizona, there's a place called Apex where people get together, to talk about different roles, to learn different things, to learn safe practices. So there's a lot out there. You kind of have to just look for it.
All right. All right. Well, I don't know if we have that in Atlanta. I'm moving out to LA, so I'm sure there's tons of that out there. But
I'm sure.
we're limited. But that's good. You guys go explore. And if you're dealing with guilt or shame around your fantasies, you heard Ellie, go find a relationship therapist or a ASEC therapist, someone who can help, make it a safer place to open up about this stuff so you're not alone.
Mm-hmm.
And I know, for instance, my partner, he was into certain things and we didn't have that mediator. And so I had all those fears and we had to face it as a couple. And it is like, if we could have paid for someone like you to help us, I mean, this podcast itself's helped me. I'm like, whoa, oh, that's what he was talking about. Oh, I was wrong. Oh, my bad. Okay, this is normal, So it's so worth it, guys. Do it.
Yeah.
So, okay, I want to hear about this course that you are going to be launching. Can you tell us about this?
Yeah, so I actually launched it like last week, I think. It's, still fresh. But there's so many things to talk about between a couple or throuple or whoever around sex to better open communication, create comfort, learn things about themselves and their partner. And even in my work with people, like there's only so much we can cover in sessions. But this course is a 6-part course that it's all online. They can do it from the comfort of their home. And it really helps people start opening conversations. For example, there's a section about the body. There's a section about sexual history, likes, dislikes, and just it kind of keeps going from there. And it provides, questions and conversation topics and then activities to kind of pair with those things. So that way people can really open conversations and explore. And I think it's so needed.
Yeah.
I think it's the best if people are doing it while in therapy, but even if they're not, if that gets them to open the conversation with themselves and their partner, and because they get to do it at home alone, maybe that feels safe. I don't really care. I just want them to be able to start doing that,
Yeah, because like I haven't met many couples, like because I've have a good relationship with a lot of men and a good relationship with a lot of women, and I hear it's either one or the other, and the couples is holding back.
Mm-hmm.
Is there's something going on sexually? Just one of them's not into it, or he doesn't know what I like, he doesn't get me off, or she's not wanting to do it anyway. It's like this would be just so great to open up that conversation because everyone's scared to talk about it.
Yeah. And I mean, some of the questions are, I don't know a good word for this, like general or basic of just, getting to understand your person. But then some questions are things like, as like your partner asking, do you want me to push your boundaries? If so, like, how do you want me to do that? How do you feel about being vocal in the bedroom? How do you feel about me being vocal? To really like touch on some of these pieces that a lot of people, in addition to not talking about it, they also may just kind of create their own narratives about this of like, oh, I don't think he likes that, but they've never actually asked. And even I had multiple couples basically kind of go through it first as my testing. And there are people that have great, healthy lives. And even they found some benefit from it. And they got to talk about things that they had never talked about with their partner.
Interesting. So yeah. I wonder, so do you think their main fear? I mean, I could guess, but what do you think people's main fear is about opening up to each other?
I mean, it really kind of depends on where they're coming from, in the sense of some people fear not being good enough, too much, being easy to abandon. So if they say anything that could potentially, scare their partner from leaving them, that doesn't feel safe. And so in any, relationship that I work with, I really help try to create that security and attachment So then it doesn't matter what you're talking about, whether it's sex or something else, you can have safety in opening any conversation. Um, this course, it's the Risque Roundtable. Um,
Oh, I love that name.
yeah, I loved it too. It's just sex focused, but I hope that can translate to other conversations too.
Yeah, because if they can get past something so vulnerable, then it'll build bonding doing your course, trust. It could put in a spark back, build a stronger friendship. I mean, if you can get past the hard topics, I mean, you'll trust each other more.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm very clear in the course, like this is not a replacement for therapy, which is why I definitely suggest people do it in conjunction with therapy.
Yeah.
But even if you're not, like I said, in my opinion, there's just so many benefits to the course. And like in my relationship, we could talk about anything, especially around sex. There's nothing that is scary to talk about or like, oh, I'm worried, I'm going to be judged for this. And I wish it's like that for everybody.
Yeah. Yeah. I think like where my personal fear is like, what if I found out something that is something I don't want to be, don't want to be a part of? and and it's like something that scares me so bad. Like I have that feeling, and I'm sure that's from religious stuff, but
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I have certain things that like if I found out, I don't know if I would stay. And that's where I'm at. And I hate saying this out loud because I feel like such a douche. But I'm working through this as I do this show. I'm just being honest. Like
Yeah.
it is scary to be a safe place for someone.
Well, I mean, if you found something that you didn't want to participate in, I mean, there's lots of different options, right? Maybe starting and figuring out why, like what's behind that. Is it something that you want to explore and maybe change, your interest in that? Is it something that, maybe your partner can explore with somebody else and you guys do the groundwork to make that safe first? Build that security. Like there's different options,
Yeah,
depending on conversations and comfort. And, when you think of life, not one person can meet every single one of your needs.
right.
And for some people in the sex world, that's when they do incorporate other people and that helps their relationship. So to each their own.
Right. It is. Yeah. Well, I'm pretty darn lucky with my current situation. There's things, and you're so right about that. I remember at the beginning of my relationship, I had such high expectations, super Virgo over here, of like you have to meet all these needs.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure it was so overwhelming for him. But sex is one that um we were both pretty aligned. I
Mm-hmm.
think I was just always afraid for the shoe to drop. I'd find out something else or this or that. Like that's my own abandonment woundings and this and that. But yeah, but there's certain things your partner can't meet, and that's what you have friends for. But I think sexually we fall in love with people and sometimes they don't meet that particular sexual need. And that's what you're saying,
Mm-hmm.
that you find someone else. But back to this course. So how long does it take to go through your course?
Everybody's different.
Okay.
I recommend to people to spend at least 1 week per section. Some people do that, some people don't. And also just the time that people make to do the course. If they're like, okay, we'll set aside 30 minutes on Wednesday, that's probably not enough. And
Yeah.
so just, doing the course and being intentional to actually do the course. And really, what's the course about? Well, it's about connecting and spending time with your partner. So I hope that's something that's fun and exciting and it doesn't feel like work or a chore.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think we're all afraid we're going to get punished and this and that when we've been hiding ourselves for 20 years in a marriage. I mean, it probably is. Whereas in the beginning of a relationship, oh, this is fun. Let's do this sex course. Like, oh yeah, this is sexy. But 20 years we've had a mask on,
Mm-hmm.
hiding because we don't want to be left because we've invested all this time. We're in love with this person. We have a family.
Right.
So I could see where it's like, it's depending on the stage you're in. And I think it's good. There's people like you, Ellie, that you can help walk them through that. I know I would need that for sure.
Yeah. And the way that I created it, I firmly believe it can apply to anybody, any gender, any sexuality, any time of the relationship, whether you're early in the relationship or 20 years in. None of the questions are specific to like, oh, this only, applies in your honeymoon stage. It's just, this is what it is, right? And
Right.
learning to just understand yourself, your partner. So I tried to make it really like anybody.
Well, that's great. So if people want to take this course, where do they find it?
So I have a website for it, risqueroundtable.com. And I have a little discount code to celebrate the launch right now. The word Risque, RISK. And
Yeah.
it's $100 off. And
Ooh.
hopefully people can, like I said, start opening some conversations and have some fun.
Yeah. So I will post all of that below, guys. So don't worry about it. And I'll make sure to do the promo code as well. And what should people expect to get out of this? What is a result that to their pains around this? What are the results?
The people that I know have taken it so far, they've definitely felt more connected in their relationship, not just sexually, but also emotionally, because you had vulnerable conversations, you created trust and safety, and those are really important emotional needs in a relationship. Sexually, usually their sex life is maybe a little bit more fulfilling or exciting, because you're exploring or you're not concerned about judgment. And so lots of different benefits. I think it, depends where people are starting, but ultimately I'd say those are some of the overarching benefits for everybody.
That's great. Well, I'd say, heck yeah, guys, go get to that table. All right. If people want to find you and get in contact with you outside of the course, if they're wanting help or they're just wanting to follow what you do, where can they find you?
Yeah, so my website is just fultztherapy.com, or I have an Instagram, Fultz Sex Therapy. So lots of different ways to connect.
Well, no excuse, guys. You're ready to open up your fantasies, open up the conversations. You got multiple tools today. You are not alone. You got Ellie, you got us, you got her course. Sounds hot and sexy. Go do it. Well, thank you so much, Elle, for being on with us today. And thank you guys for, again, keeping it red. And we will see you next time. Thanks for joining the Life in Red today, where we embrace passion, confidence, and positive sexuality. Keep painting your journey in bold red strokes. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow us so that you never miss out on living your best red life. Ready for more? Stay passionate, stay red. See you next episode.